do that first. I'm recording this so that those who are unable to make it here can still get the information that's being presented. So just some Zoom etiquette, which you probably are already familiar with. Just a note to stay muted. There will be some engagement opportunities. We have a couple of polls, and there's a Q&A session, and then towards the end there are some discussion questions for which we'll move people into some breakout rooms. And if I've forgotten something, Daniela from the Multicultural Center is also co-hosting. She will be monitoring the chat if you've got any chat questions. And without further ado, again, I'm really appreciative of everyone being here, and I will turn it over to Ben. Take it away, Ben.
Thank you. I'm just gonna speak first to make sure that everyone can hear me. Give me like a wave or a thumbs up. All right, cool, thank you. So I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. There you go. Oh, wait. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and start now. My name is Ben Alton, and we're presenting Denim Day, Harvey Weinstein, and the Abuse of Power. This is gonna be presented by the Multicultural Center at the Clackamas Community College in coordination with the SAM team with Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And we just wanted to go over some of the things about Denim Day, Harvey Weinstein, and the abuse of power. And there's a little thing down there that says cultivate a culture of consent that was made by our fantastic coordinator, Daniela. Thank you very much. And so without further ado, I'm gonna get started. Okay. So before we get started, I just want to give a quick land acknowledgement. For those of you who don't know what a land acknowledgement is, essentially it is just a way to give respect to the indigenous people who took care of these lands before us. So I wanted to just say that we acknowledge the land on which we sit and occupy today as the traditional home of the following tribal nations: Clackamas, Multnomah, Watalala, Tualatin, Willamette, Tumwater, Chinook, Kalapuya, and the Moala peoples. It is important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering and to this dialogue. We take this opportunity to thank and honor the original caretakers of this land, their lives, and their descendants. Yeah. We understand if you are participating in this virtual event, you might not be located in one of the cities that our college campuses are located on. If that is the case, we do have a few resources that are available that I have been personally using as well that have been fantastic. The Native Land app in your app store and Native Land online, you can type in the website and you can find the indigenous history of your local area. So before we get started, we're gonna have our first poll question. How many of you guys are aware or familiar with Denim Day? Okay. I think.
We've got a couple more.
Okay.
We've had 13 people vote out of 15.
14 out of
14? 15. Everyone has voted.
Okay. So for those of you guys who did answer, can you guys go over just quickly a little bit of what you know? You can unmute yourselves if you guys would like.
I can say something if that's okay.
Yep.
So I don't know a ton about it. I do know that it was Denim Day came about as the result of a Supreme Court in Italy, or the Supreme Court in Italy, overturning the rape conviction of a driving instructor who had been convicted of raping one of his students. And the decision was overturned because the student was wearing tight jeans at the time of the assault. So they presumed that she must have helped him get the jeans off, and that it was a consensual interaction. And so the next day, after that decision came down, the women in the Italian parliament wore denim to work.
Thank you. That's a great summary. Yeah, so as she was saying, in 1998, the Italian Supreme Court overturned the rape conviction of a driving instructor who had been charged with sexually assaulting his female student. It had been argued by the defense that the woman's jeans were so tight that the only way that they could have been removed was with her assistance, so therefore the sex was consensual. In its ruling, the court said that it is a common fact of experience that it is nearly impossible to slip off tight jeans, even partly without the active collaboration of the person who is wearing them. Yeah, so I mean, that by itself is just an insane thing to think about, that because someone stated that they had an experience that jeans were too tight, so the person had to give consent in order to have them taken off, is just a ridiculous statement in my opinion. But Denim Day started because of this and began as a way to practice solidarity and support survivors by exposing harmful behaviors and attitudes surrounding sexual violence. While the Italian Supreme Court reversed its too tight jeans ruling in 2008, 10 years later, Denim Day continues to ask people to make a social statement by wearing jeans on this day as a visible means of protest against the misconceptions that surround sexual violence. If you guys would like to find more information on it, Denim Day does have a website, and it's called denimdayinfo.org.
And you may notice that some of us have our Zoom backgrounds came from the Denim Day website.
Okay. And so how does Denim Day kind of play into who Harvey Weinstein is? Well, for those of you guys who may not know, Harvey Weinstein is a former film producer and co-founder of the production company of Miramax, which was responsible for very popular and famous movies such as Pulp Fiction, Heavenly Creatures, and Flirting with Disaster, just to name a few, but he has been a part of many more. After leaving Miramax, Weinstein and his brother went on to create their own film studio, the Weinstein Company, which he was a co-chair of from 2005 to 2017. Can anyone quickly answer or give me a reason why we might be covering Harvey Weinstein today on Denim Day? Okay, well, let's go ahead here. So why Harvey Weinstein? In October 2017, the New York Times reported that more than a dozen women accused Weinstein of sexually harassing, assaulting, and/or raping them. On May 25th, 2018, Weinstein was charged and arrested by the New York police with rapes, criminal sex act, sex abuse, and sexual misconduct for incidents involving 2 separate women. With women coming out about their sexual abuse from Weinstein, it led to what we know today as a hashtag #MeToo movement, where similar allegations of sexual abuse from powerful men began to come out. And this was also known as the Weinstein effect. Give a thumbs up or a clap if you guys have heard of the Me Too movement. Yeah, so this was one of the first leading causes of causing the Me Too movement, which I think has been very substantial and very helpful to the whole misconceptions about sexual assault and whatnot. So here's just a picture of Harvey Weinstein being seized at New York because of the allegations that followed him. Yeah. And I just wanted to go over some of the victims of Harvey Weinstein. Of course, there are a lot of victims, and if you are interested, I do encourage you guys to read all of their stories, but for time's sake, I didn't want to cover all of them, but all their stories are just as important as each other. First one, Gwyneth Paltrow. Paltrow says that Weinstein asked her to give him a massage in his hotel suite after casting her in the leading role of 1996 Emma when she was 22. She refused. He screamed at me for a long time. It was brutal. Salma Hayek, she turned down repeated sexual advances from Weinstein while making the film Frida in 2002. And she says his persuasion tactics included threats. Hayek said that Weinstein once told her, "I will kill you. Don't think I can't." And Ashley Judd, The actress says Weinstein asked her to go to his hotel room under the guise of a business meeting, but appeared in a bathrobe and asked if he can give her a massage or if she could watch him shower. She refused and says he got revenge by seeking to damage her career. Director Peter Jackson has come forward to say he removed her from a casting list as a direct result of what he now thinks was false information provided by Weinstein. And like I said before, there are many more victims, and if you are interested, I truly highly encourage you guys to read into them and find out more about what happened, because some of the things that Weinstein did proceed with are very hurtful to these people, to his victims. Okay. And so this comes into a direct correlation with the abuse of power within power dynamics. According to goodtherapy.org, power is the ability to influence events, peoples, and environments around us. Having power is a responsibility, and unfortunately, some people use their power to cause harm to others, much like Weinstein did. People are required to get consent from the affected individual before they can take action, no matter what the context is. Weinstein was obviously one of the most influential film producers in Hollywood at that time, and it just shows that he was in a position of power. And these actresses who wanted to, in order to make a career in their profession, I mean, they were kind of cornered into a situation where they had to feel like they had to comply with his advances, or they might end up having their careers damaged. He used his position of power to make sexual advances on actresses in the filming industry. He knew that he had the power and the ability to either make or break these women's careers. With this in mind, when Weinstein decided to proceed with his sexual advances, he took away his victims' right to consent. By threatening to take away their careers, Weinstein displayed a true lack of ethics and abused his power as one of the most influential film producers in Hollywood. Is everyone doing okay so far? Any questions or? I think everyone's doing okay. Okay, cool. Okay, moving on. I just wanted to add this slide in here because I just wanted to let it be known that sexual assault can affect anybody and everybody. Women are not the only ones affected by sexual assault. Men and members of the LGBTQA+ community are also victims of sexual assault. And Terry Crews, a former NFL player and actor, speaks about his experience with sexual assault and how the abuse of power played a part in his assault. Yeah, so I'm going to play this video here, and it just goes on to show that even though Terry Crews is a very athletic, big person, he can still be sexually assaulted, and it's not really just depending on how your physical attributes or whatnot. It can happen to anybody. So I'm just going to play this for 1 minute. Okay, so that's the end of the video there. Does anyone want to make any comments after watching that video? If so, feel free to unmute yourselves and give a comment or two. Or add into the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, moving on. I just wanted to give some quick statistics about how sexual assault is a lot more widespread than what we might initially think. 1 in 6 women will be sexually assaulted, and 1 in 33 men have been the victim of a rape attempt. And 2 things that really upset me personally is that 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18. And an estimated, and this is still estimated, 63,000 children are sexually abused each year. Okay, and a few more sexual assault statistics here. More than 800 people are assaulted every day in the US. 77% of these assaults go unreported. 80% of rapes are committed by someone the victim knows. And 90 to 98% of rape reports are true. False reporting is shown to be very, very rare. And one stat that I found quite surprising was that 99.5% of rapists will never spend a day in jail. I would like to go on to our second poll question now, which will be right here. Do you think that people from minorities are more likely to be victims of sexual assault, less likely to be victims of sexual assault, or experiencing sexual assault about the same rate as the overall population? Okay, 2 more voters here. Oh, okay. Okay. For any of you guys who voted, did you guys want to give your explanation to why you chose your answer? If that is okay. I'll wait a little bit to see who might be interested in sharing. Okay, I'll take that as a no. But thank you for answering, everybody. Close this here. There we go. So, racial, sexual, and gender minority groups are more likely to be victims of sexual assault. Transgender people are at a much greater risk to be sexually assaulted, up to 300% more likely. Gay, bisexual, and Black men all have higher odds of being sexually assaulted than heterosexual and white men. And Black transgender people are more likely to be sexually assaulted than white transgender people. All statistics that we are showing here is provided by the Inside Higher Ed as of March 2017 by Emily Tate. So it's really unfortunate that people from minority groups, no matter if it's race or sexual orientation, do have higher rates of being sexually assaulted. I think it's mostly due to also in playing a part with power dynamics of people. Yeah, so this is a sample that was taken from the University of Arizona. It shows that non-heterosexual students were having incidents of sexual assault and sexual misconduct up to 10% as much more than heterosexual students. And the study was conducted in 2018 and surveyed 1,413 college students across 2 universities. 43% of college students reported a form of sexual assault in the last 12 months. 51% of heterosexual women reported a form of sexual assault in the last 12 months. 32% of heterosexual men reported a form of sexual assault in the last 12 months. 64% of sexual minority women reported a form of sexual assault in the last 12 months. And 52% of sexual minority men reported a form of sexual assault in the last 12 months. So I'm just kind of seeing a trend of how people who are from minority groups with sexual orientation or race do get affected at a higher rate than heterosexual or majority race people. Okay, and then I would like to start by starting our discussion questions for the day, where we're going to be separating into discussion break groups. I'm going to read out these discussion questions for you guys first. 1, you have just been hired by your dream company. Although everything seems to be off to a great start, one of the higher ups begins to make, okay, sorry, there's a wasp. I think he likes me. Chill out. Bro.
Also putting the questions into the chat because once we put people in breakout rooms, this is the
All right, I'm back. I think. I don't know.
new challenges we have to deal with presentations. Yeah. I inserted the questions into the chat because once we do breakout rooms, you might not be able to see the screen that Ben is sharing.
Yeah. But I think I'm going to read off the discussion questions one time here just for you guys to hear it. You have just been hired by your dream company. Although everything seems to be off to a great start, one of the hires begins making sexual remarks about you and begins to make suggestive physical contact with you. For example, putting their hands on your shoulder. What do you do? Number 2, one of your college classmate friends tells you that they had just been sexually assaulted by one of the instructors at the school. They ask you to promise not to tell anyone, which you oblige to. In this scenario, what would you do for your friend?
So if you haven't been put out into a breakout room before, you're going to see something on your screen about entering a breakout room, and I will send you there now.
Are people in their breakout rooms? I don't know.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
You can join. You've been invited to 2. So if you go in there, then okay. I'll go to 3, and then there'll be me, you, Anissa, and Danielle in each room.
Okay. I'm going to stop my share real quick before I go in because it wouldn't let me join. But yeah, did you see that wasp? Uh-oh.
We were kind of talking a little bit about, what was it? Something about how when situations like what you pointed out happen, it seems that the bulk of the responsibility is put on the person to whom it happened to say something, right? Which can get into a whole situation if if years down the line you then decide to say something. But in that, in that moment, the responsibility is yours to do something about it, right? It's not, it seems that there's this imbalance between putting pressure on the perpetrated against and not on the perpetrator or the would-be perpetrator, which I find really frustrating.
Yeah, it just kind of plays on to the point about the person who is the perpetrator is in a position of power against you. And it also puts you at another kind of powerless situation where you just got a new job and you want to make good impressions. So you kind of feel like you have to appease this person in order to like move up, or like you don't want to face any punishment or even get fired from your job. So yeah, it definitely puts you in a position where you kind of have to go make decisions for yourself. One of the things that my group was originally talking about was how to do the necessary steps in order to de-escalate the situation, or what you can do. First, we talked about how maybe you can go try talking to the person directly and try to have a civilized conversation about not pursuing any more physical contact or things that make you feel uncomfortable. And if that doesn't work, then you might have to go into HR or a higher authority figure in order to like resolve the issue. But another thing that we did also talk about was how some organizations or businesses will try to cover up certain individuals who might be too important, or they don't want things to come out of their company or organization that might come out as bad. So they might want to protect that person. So yeah, it's definitely a trickier issue the more that you think about it. But I think that it's very important for all of us to try to, don't be afraid to speak out if something is going wrong with you, because people don't, it's my personal belief that people don't lie about their sexual assault cases. I don't think that a lot of people or many people even do that. So does anyone else have anything to say for the first one? For the first question here?
There's something I wanted to chime in, but it actually rolls into the second question, which is understanding that people who are victims are afraid and not sure what they want to do. And it is true, like Anissa says, that that they feel pressure in terms of that it's their responsibility to figure out what they want. And so, as we move into the second portion, from the college's perspective, my role as Title IX coordinator for students, if you're not familiar with it, Title IX is a federal law that requires colleges and universities to make sure that we are educating people about sexual assault through programs like this, but also then investigating and mitigating instances. And so, so students can make a Title IX complaint, in which it's an internal to the college investigation. Students can make a police report. We do have a college safety officer who is assigned to the campus, or a police officer from Oregon City Police Department is assigned to the campus. And then there are also two methods of confidential reporting. One is speaking to the counselors in the counseling department. They are confidential, so that if you share something that happened with them, they wouldn't have to share it. And then we have somebody from Clackamas Women's Services, and I know we're going to have a resources page in a minute, but they are a confidential advocate for sexual assault. So their entire job is surrounding making sure that they're available for victims of sexual assault, and they are entirely confidential. And so by law, they do not share any information, even with me, as part of the Title IX team. So it's just important for students to be aware of that, and that we have other resources and information that would be available to you. So sorry if there were questions or comments that were coming from either of these two, just anything that came up in your groups that that was good fodder for discussion, or that you had questions about in terms of how things work at Clackamas.
I didn't have any questions per se, but in our group, we kind of talked about perception of like situations, and I think that that's plays a really big deal, because there's like the victim could think like, oh, I'm probably overthinking things, and they try to kind of like minimize the situation. And I think it's really hard to like know, like, is this a situation, is this like a cause for concern? And like just going with that gut feeling versus like trying to just play it down and then just kind of put it out of your mind kind of thing. I think that that's like a really big thing. I thought it was something important to note.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, that is a good point. And it's important that I know from my role that a lot of students they're worried about what's going to happen after they say something. And I guess it's important that, we want to take the perspective that we only want to put into motion things that the victim wants to put into motion. And so that's why talking to a counselor or talking to a sexual assault advocate from Clackamas Women's Services is really important to do first, because then you can at least get it out, and you can check your perception, and you can talk to somebody about it, and you don't have to have the added worry of, oh, I don't know if this is a big deal because I don't want to end up starting something that starting a snowball that I don't want to happen. And so, so I really encourage students to seek out counselors and seek out a sexual assault advocate so that they can talk through that. So, and thank you for the point, Ashley.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other comments they would like to make about the second question?
Something that came up in my group was, and it kind of goes with both of the questions, like having to deal with power, and honestly not really sure if, like in the first question, if I would say anything, if, because of power dynamics. And so, and I think that comes up with the second one too, like if we had a friend that didn't really want to say anything, like what would we do? And so what really stuck out to me from our discussion from that was, as an ally and friend and supporter, like making sure to speak up on the sidelines of that. Like if, for example, in the first question, if that were to happen in a group setting and I just observed it, being willing to speak up about it and say something. And like someone said earlier, if you're reducing or minimizing what had happened, then that could be something where, we help them feel comfortable talking about it and be like, no, I totally agree that that was wrong. And just trying to be more supportive if the survivor themselves doesn't feel like they can say something.
We have a question from Elizabeth that came through that I think is a good one. Where is the line between respecting the victim's privacy and fulfilling your obligation to possible future victims? Curious to know what others here in our Zoom room think.
Yeah, sorry, what was the question again?
What's the line between respecting the victim's privacy and fulfilling the obligation to possible future victims, as in, needing to say something because if somebody has done something to one person, then they could potentially do it to another in the future. If I'm reading that question correctly.
Well, I'm kind of thinking that I think we have, like, overall, like if it was my friend, I think the one thing that I would prioritize is like my friend's healing. Like this is something that's very traumatic. And so like I think that I would just encourage them to find healing. And if, obviously if it has to be through a counselor, then do that. But then I think there's a certain amount of healing that comes through, seeing the person who was sexually assaulted you, seeing the consequence, like that they see a consequence of their actions. But I think that I would prioritize my friend's healing first. And so if like pursuing it at the moment, like pursuing the sexual assault or like of the assaulter, like them facing the consequences, if pursuing that is going to cause them just a lot more heartache and a lot more trauma, then I think I would let them do their thing and like let them find a place to heal before I would pursue any sort of trying to get what's it called, just more like basically get the sexual assaulter to face the consequences. I think I would prioritize my friend's healing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Kind of like how you were saying, I mean, you were the one who wasn't being
Lost Ben.
May I add something?
Yeah, feel free.
I feel like what Noe just said is very much what the Me Too movement has been based on, right? The sort of focus on the victims and their healing. It's not about necessarily finding retribution or even necessarily making sure that they're abuser faces consequences, although that is a great outcome, it is absolutely meant to be focused on the people who have been harmed and them finding the support that they need and getting the healing that they deserve. I know any time that I hear Tarana Burke speak, the woman who originally started using the words Me Too, she is constantly having to remind people that Me Too is about healing and safety for victims. It's not about the people who do who are making the problem. It's about finding healing spaces for victims. So I think what Noe said is really important and something that we should really also think about when we're thinking about these scenarios. Not that a person like facing the consequences of their actions isn't important and necessary. And I we also talked about this in our breakout, is like the responsibility that is put on the victim to do something. Like once you become a victim, you are also responsible for everybody else's actions for some reason, right? Like you become, like this burden is given to you whether you want it or not. Just the sort of unfair bind that people are put into when they're perpetrated against.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. Since we are running a little bit low on time, I'm just going to go over to our last slide about how resources are available. So just to give you guys a few of the resources that are available on our campus is that we have counseling at Clackamas Community College. We've inserted their email at the bottom there. There's also the National Sexual Assault Hotline, which is 1-800-656-4673. There's also the Oregon Sexual Assault Task Force. We also applied their website onto the bottom there. And we also have Clackamas Women's Services. They have their phone number there and also their email, and Title IX, which I'll actually let John take care of it here since he is the coordinator for it.
Yeah, I've talked about Title IX before. And if you go to that website, you should be able to link up with just about all the other resources that are available to anyone, to any part of the college community that needs resources. And again, I make up part of the Title IX team. My role again is to help students get resources, to help them determine what steps they want to take. Do they want to file a complaint? Do they want to file a police report? Do they simply want someone to talk to? I do also conduct investigations if the person who is accused of the sexual assault or sexual harassment is, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. I conduct investigations if it's a student. So there are others who get involved if it is a faculty or a staff member. But that's a good place to start. If you have questions about all of this, is to go to the Title IX page. There are 2 other staff members within Human Resources that are on the Title IX team. Our sexual assault advocate from Clackamas Community Services is part of the Title IX team, and then also the Director of College Safety. I'm checking the chat question. No, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, we did not, that was my fault. I did not record the bystander session. That was an oversight. But hopefully we can get a copy of the presentation itself because it was a PowerPoint. So we'll make sure that we can get that to you. I saw in the chat earlier, Anissa, you had a couple questions. I think you were putting out there for discussion, or I want to make sure that either they needed to get answered or addressed.
It was just they came up sort of as Ben was sharing some things. Let me even see what they were. Yeah, so about, we were talking about abuses of power, and, we're talking about this on a day that began because of abuses of power in, between 2 people, and then also between a society and its people who are meant to be the sort of arbiters of protection in some way, and how that fell apart, and where might those abuses of power been obvious in that and those situations. And then also, you know, our theme for the month is cultivating a culture of consent, and Ben was sharing some statistics, and it felt like what that was showing to me is that we clearly do not live in a culture of consent. And how do these statistics illustrate the importance of building that, of continuing to cultivate that beyond just Sexual Assault Awareness Month?
Thank you for raising that point. I'm not sure if there's an answer there, but it's a good observation. In noticing again the time, I'll see if we can actually put the presentation, the bystander intervention presentation itself, on the Tumblr page, which reminds me that the Tumblr page address, if you haven't been to it, is cccsam2020.tumblr.com. That has a lot of resources and information. I did want to point out that if you're not following ASG's Instagram account, which is ASG, the number 4 and the letter U, ASG4U, that there is a question about what does consent mean to you, poll question on the Instagram, and if you submit an answer to that question, you could be entered into an opportunity to get pizza delivered to your house. Sorry, obviously I live near the interstate. So check out the Tumblr page. Thank you for putting it up, Bo. And check out the ASG Instagram account. And back to you, Ben, for some closing thoughts.
Thank you. So that will conclude this Denim Day presentation virtual event. I want to thank everyone who came up to join us. But yeah, you guys are all free to go. So unless you guys have any other things that you want to say, feel free to go to class or go get something to eat.
Thank you very much, Ben, for leading this. Thanks everybody for participating.